The Hague, Genoa, Fiume, Trieste, etc., and are addressed to as many places, often poste restante. Many are letters from women, some in beautiful handwriting, on thick paper, others on scraps of paper, in painful hands, ill spelt. A countess writes pitifully, imploring help. One protests her love, in spite of the many chagrins he has caused her. Another asks how they are to live together. And another laments that a report has gone about that she is secretly living with him, which may harm his reputation. Some are in French, more in Italian. Mon cher Giacometto, writes one woman, in French. Carissimo a amatissimo, writes another, in Italian. These letters from women are in some confusion, and are in need of a good deal of sorting over and rearranging before their full extent can be realized. Thus I found letters in the same handwriting, separated by letters in other handwritings. Many are unsigned, or signed only by a single initial. Many are undated, or dated only with the day of the week or month. There are a great many letters, dating from 1779 to 1786, signed Francesca Buscini, a name which I cannot identify. They are written in Italian, and one of them begins Unico mio vero amico, my only true friend. Others are signed Virginia B. One of these is dated Forli, October the 15th, 1773. There is also a Teresa B., who writes from Genoa. I was at first unable to identify the writer of a whole series of letters, in French, very affectionate and intimate letters, usually unsigned, occasionally signed B. She calls herself Votre petite amie, or she ends with a half-smiling, half-reproachful "Good night, and sleep better than I." In one letter, sent from Paris in 1759, she writes, "Never believe me, but when I tell you that I love you, and that I shall love you always." In another letter, ill-spelt, as her letters often are, she writes, "Be assured that evil tongues, vapours, calumny, nothing can change my heart, which is yours entirely, and has no will to change its master." Now it seems to me that these letters must be from Manon Baletti, and that they are the letters referred to in the 6th volume of the Memoirs. We read there, page 60, how on Christmas Day, 1759, Casanova receives a letter from Manon in Paris, announcing her marriage with Monsieur Blondel, architect to the king and member of his academy. She returns him his letters, and begs him to return hers, or burn them. Instead of doing so, he allows Esther to read them, intending to burn them afterwards. Esther begs to be allowed to keep the letters, promising to preserve them religiously all her life. These letters, he says, numbered more than 200, and the shortest were of 4 pages. Certainly there are not 200 of them at Dux, but it seems to me highly probable that Casanova made a final selection from Manon's letters, and it is these which I have found. But, however this may be, I was fortunate enough to find the set of letters which I was most anxious to find, the letters from Henriette, whose loss every writer on Casanova has lamented. Henriette, it will be remembered, makes her first appearance at Cesena in the year 1748. After their meeting at Geneva, she reappears, romantically apropos, 22 years later at Aix-en-Provence, and she writes to Casanova proposing un commerce épistolaire, asking him what he has done since his escape from prison, and promising to do her best to tell him all that has happened to her during the long interval. After quoting her letter, he adds, "I replied to her, accepting the correspondence that she offered me, and telling her briefly all my vicissitudes. She related to me in turn, in some 40 letters, all the history of her life. If she dies before me, I shall add these letters to these memoirs, but today she is still alive, and always happy, though now old." It has never been known what became of these letters, and why they were not added to the memoirs. I have found a great quantity of them, some signed with her married name in full, Henriette de Schnetzmann, and I am inclined to think that she survived Casanova, for one of the letters is dated Bayreuth, 1798, the year of Casanova's death. They are remarkably charming, written with a mixture of piquancy and distinction, and I will quote the characteristic beginning and end of the last letter I was able to find. It begins, "No, it is impossible to be sulky with you," and ends, "If I become vicious, it is you, my mentor, who make me so, and I cast my sins upon you. Even if I were damned, I should still be your most devoted friend, Henriette de Schnetzmann." Casanova was 23 when he met Henriette. Now herself an old woman, she writes to him when he is 73, as if the 50 years that had passed were blotted out in the faithful affection of her memory. How many more discreet and less changing lovers have had the quality of constancy in change, to which this lifelong correspondence bears witness? Does it not suggest a view of Casanova not quite the view of all the world? To me it shows the real man, who perhaps of all others best understood what Shelley meant when he said, "True love in this differs from gold or clay, that to divide is not to take away." But though the letters from women naturally interested me the most, they were only a certain proportion of the great mass of correspondence which I turned over. There were letters from Carlo Angiolini, who was afterwards to bring the manuscript of the Memoirs to Brockhaus; from Balbi, the monk with whom Casanova escaped from the Piombi; from the Marquis Albergati, playwright, actor, and eccentric, of whom there is some account in the Memoirs; from the Marquis Mosca, a distinguished man of letters whom I was anxious to see, Casanova tells us in the same volume in which he describes his visit to the Moscas at Pesaro; from Zulian, the brother of the Duchess of Fiano; from Richard Lorraine, bel homme, ayant de l'esprit, le temps et le goût de la bonne société, who came to settle at Gorizia in 1773, while Casanova was there; from the procurator Morosini, whom he speaks of in the Memoirs as his protector, and as one of those through whom he obtained permission to return to Venice. His other protector, the Avogado Zaguri, had, says Casanova, since the affair of the Marquis Albergati, carried on a most interesting correspondence with me, and in fact I found a bundle of no less than 138 letters from him, dating from 1784 to 1798. Another bundle contains 172 letters from Count Lamberg. In the Memoirs, Casanova says, referring to his visit at Augsburg at the end of 1761, "I used to spend my evenings in a very agreeable manner at the house of Count Max de Lamberg, who resided at the court of the Prince Bishop with the title of Grand Marshal. What particularly attached me to Count Lamberg was his literary talent. A first-rate scholar, learned to a degree, he has published several much-esteemed works. I carried on an exchange of letters with him, which ended only with his death 4 years ago in 1792. Casanova tells us that, at his second visit to Augsburg, in the early part of 1767, he supped with Count Lamberg 2 or 3 times a week, during the 4 months he was there. It is with this year that the letters I have found begin. They end with the year of his death, 1792. In his Mémorial d'un mondain, Lamberg refers to Casanova as a man known in literature, a man of profound knowledge. In the first edition of 1774, he laments that a man such as Monsieur de S. Galt should not yet have been taken back into favour by the Venetian government, and in the second edition, 1775, rejoices over Casanova's return to Venice. Then there are letters from Da Ponte, who tells the story of Casanova's curious relations with Madame d'Urfe in his Memorie scritte da esso, 1829. From Pittone, Bonno, and others mentioned in different parts of the Memoirs, and from some dozen others who are not mentioned in them. The only letters in the whole collection that have been published are those from the Prince de Ligne and from Count Koenig. Section 4. Casanova tells us in his Memoirs that, during his later years at Dux, he had only been able to hinder black melancholy from devouring his poor existence, or sending him out of his mind, by writing 10 or 12 hours a day,